Barbara.
I'm Cheryl.
And I'm Naima. We're three Black moms.
Indigenous Peoples Day. A lot of people celebrated it the second Monday of October, and that's usually Columbus Day. Well, as always, there is a lot of conversation about Columbus Day. It's a long-time traditional celebration, and for the Italian community, for them, it means pride in the Italian heritage of their great ancestor, Christopher Columbus, who discovered America. Well, as we look at history, we realize that didn't really happen. And one of the things that comes up every year is the brutal treatment of the indigenous people. It's not pleasant, and our kindergartners who make little turkeys or, and all the other little things surrounding the whole idea of Christopher Columbus and the Pilgrims and Thanksgiving and all of that kind of smushed together. It's not pleasant when we talk about what really happened to the indigenous people and the truth about Christopher Columbus. So how do we deal with this as we strive to correct our historic presentation of the history of America? And how do we honor those people who were already here? Well, we've got with us a guest today who is we've got a couple of guests from the indigenous community, and we want to hear from you. So feel free to write in your comments on our YouTube and Facebook pages, Three Black Moms, and we'll share them with the rest of our viewers as we answer the question about Indigenous Peoples Day. Should it replace Columbus Day? Well, we will take a look at that, and I want to welcome our sisters and welcome to our show, Cheyenne Hubbard. Thank you so much for joining us. And we've got on our live line Mama AZ Paris from Arizona. And we want to take a look at some of the things that all of us thought growing up, because I know, since kindergarten, that was what was taught. Christopher Columbus discovered America. And in those days, no one talked about the killings that went on. The way I learned about it was he came here, discovered the people, thought it was India, so he called them Indians. They did admit that. But then after that, the Pilgrims started coming, and everybody was all happy with Thanksgiving, and, it was just fun and joy, and, there we go, America. So that's what I thought. And then later on, when I discovered the brutality, I thought, oh, that's not nice. So first, I want to welcome our guest, Cheyenne Hubbard, to the show. And I understand you're of the Cherokee heritage. Is that correct?
Hi, yes, my name is Cheyenne Hubbard, and I am a citizen of Cherokee Nation.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now, what were you taught about Christopher Columbus growing up? What were you taught? And then what was said at home about the history of how people had been treated during his after his coming? And then, of course, we're going to talk about the fact that he wasn't really on the mainland when he came, but we'll talk about that.
He was never here.
Yeah.
He was never, ever here. And they're still teaching that, right, Cheyenne?
Yeah, I believe they're probably still teaching that. When I was going to school, they always had that famous saying that Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492. Yeah, and so that's what when I was going to school, because I am a 22-year-old who recently got out of college, and so they're still teaching this from my knowledge. And to myself, when I heard that, I was like, how did he discover America when there are people already living here for centuries and millennia? And it always rubbed me the wrong way. But when I got older, in middle school, right, we started to learn about, how a bunch of the Native Americans were just wiped out through disease, or if they weren't wiped out, they were, sexually assaulted and forced to have babies.
Mm. That's a real ugly thing to have to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Well, can we explore exactly where Columbus was? Columbus never came to um, Columbus never came to America, even though they're still teaching them that. And as somebody who teaches college age students, about your age, Cheyenne, I know that they're still teaching that. And we talked about this in class. And the thing is that the way Columbus holiday came about was because when Italians first came over here, they were not considered white. And so, in order for them to look for something for pride in their heritage, they adopted this story. The Knights of Columbus came forward and adopted this story about Columbus discovering America. And the whole thing about, oh, he thought he was in India, so he called because he was trying to get to the West Indies. One, Columbus was a brutal, but not just a brutal explorer, he was a really bad one. And where he landed was in the Caribbean, where there with the natives there, the indigenous people, the Taino, and they still exist, even though he helped wipe out much of that nation. And he was looking for a place where he could enslave people. And that was his first thought. This is a place where these people are docile, they're welcoming. I think that they could be slaves. But for us to just pick up that history and move it over to the mainland where he never set foot and still teach that is just really ridiculous. And of course, Cheyenne, as you know, we can't discover a place where there are already people there. That's like somebody walking into my house today and saying, I'm going to
Occupy this.
I'm going to discover this house in Boston, and I'm going to claim it for England, and I'm already living there. And
Right.
that's exactly what happened when the explorers came and what Columbus did in the Caribbean, not in North America. And we need to stop teaching that lie.
Yeah, he was not even here. And another thing, when it comes to where he was trying to get to, because this was all the time the British were trying to expand their empire and all of that. But you're right, he was a poor explorer. He didn't know where he was going. He happened to be sailing with some Moorish sailors who had navigated the globe, and they had been to this part of the world. So they were aware of the islands and all of that, and the mainland, because a century earlier, Mansa Musa's uncle, and he was a well-known historic figure who had traveled all over the globe, but his uncle had come here with a couple of thousand fleets of ships and landed in this area in the Americas. And so they were aware that this landmass existed. So when they sailed with Columbus, they were able to let him know that he did in fact land in a place that people already existed, because they had been trading with them over time. So how are you going to discover some place when other people have already been there, been trading with the people, interacting with the people, intermarrying with the people? You're Johnny come lately, even that. So,
and who's Leif Erikson? I remember hearing that name thrown around as a kid.
Leif Erikson was an Icelandic man who got to the very tip of North America, right? He came to the very tip in the 1900s. And how we know this is because they wrote it down and they were able to find structures that they left behind.
Mm-hmm. So
and America was named for Amerigo Vespucci.
Right.
So
and I'm sure it was called something else before he got here. Some people start naming your house, naming your place, after themselves.
Naming your neighborhood.
Yes. I mean, how do you reverse that? That's one of the things, when we know that a lot of things taught is wrong, and we know that historically it's inaccurate, it's a lie, it doesn't make people accountable for the horrors uh, that they inflicted on the people. How do we teach that? And Cheyenne, because you're kind of the generation that just is coming at the point where things are being challenged.
Mm-hmm.
My Generation Z.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
See, one of the things I believe that kids should be taught is the truth. You can teach young children stuff in a way that is not horrible, but they still need to learn. So they won't be shocked when they get into middle school. Like, oh, this is really terrible. I never knew that. Was everyone just telling me a lie this whole entire time? Why are we celebrating Thanksgiving? What is happening here? And I know for a fact, where I live at least, people are definitely challenging that we should teach the children the truth.
so how do you how do you teach that which happened to say kindergartners? Because I know that's kind of when we first heard, and in 1492 Columbus sailed the ocean blue. I mean, that's when they start teaching the lie. So at what
Yeah.
age do you tell the truth? I mean, and how do you
Well, we
At the
first
same
of all,
time.
At the
first of
same
all, we
time.
should not tell the children that he discovered anything, right?
Mm,
He didn't even land in America, and there's people already living here.
mhm.
That's the way they should be taught. And then over time, eventually, later on, you can talk about, oh, what happened.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Especially with what the first Thanksgiving was.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a whole nother conversation about how they celebrated Thanksgiving with, we all did the little pilgrim hats and the,
Yeah,
the
that was an
and
art project.
everything,
Mm-hmm.
instead of the fact that the reason why the indigenous people helped these pilgrims, because not only were they starving, they were digging up the corpses of the indigenous people's
Mm.
children and or their bodies and eating them. They were
Oh,
starving
that's
to
real
death.
horrible.
Wow.
And,
I
and,
don't know if you
and
can tell that to kindergartners.
well, no, but you know what? You can't tell them. You can't tell. There's a lot of
You
things
can
because
say how the Native Americans were very helpful to the pilgrims who were leaving their country mainly to escape religious persecution. And then they
well,
came into this country, and so many of them died on the ship on the way over. Many of them died that first year living in America. And the Native Americans actually helped them. They fed them. They taught them how to roast corn. There are a lot of things that are left out of the history books that need to be explained.
well, the whole thing about religious persecution is actually not. They weren't
It did
being
happen much
persecuted.
later.
Yeah, no. They wanted religion to be more strict. So they came over here because the religions weren't strict enough where they were coming from. So they weren't being persecuted because they just wanted more, the Puritans and the Pilgrims, they wanted things to be a lot more strict. And when they came here, to form their own country, whatever, what they also did was because the Native Americans, or the indigenous people, because it wasn't America, the indigenous people helped them, but that also came back to bite them in the butt, because what they would do, they
Yeah.
Thanksgiving came when they started celebrating after they would annihilate an indigenous nation.
Yes. So now also there were there were the kinds of people that were coming over here. Not everybody was coming here for religious freedom. When the prisons of Europe got overrun and they needed to let some people out, they were given an option. We can let you out, but you got to get out of here. You can go overseas, and that's what's going to happen to you. But we're not we're not letting you stay here anymore, so you can
So they deported them to another place.
right,
So
right,
we did not. They were not sending their best people.
right. They were not getting their best. I mean, they were trying to get rid of the riffraff, and that's really what populated this place. And they cleared out their jails in order to get rid of them. Because yeah, I mean, you got to feed and take care of people in there in jails. Like, hey, go over there and make it the best way you can. And of course, they couldn't half make it, which is why they were starving and eating corpses and everything. So I mean, all of this is not real pretty. So how do you then I don't know. I mean, like I said, we all did the little hats and the little turkeys. How do you make an art project out of it? I'm gonna pull up Cheyenne's art. And Cheyenne, I want you to tell us about this piece that you've done as we think about, how we teach children history and how we have them draw little pictures and how they learn and how we learned about the indigenous communities.
Well, this is the thing, is that children are very good at knowing what's fair and what isn't fair.
Mhm.
From the time they're 2 and 3 years old. If you teach them that other people were hurt and this is what happened, they will make sure that that doesn't happen again. Cheyenne, why don't you tell us about this story that you have in front of us?
So I painted this photo for the Cherokee Nation National Museum, and this is depicting my ancestor on Memorial Day. They're decorating the graves because one of the traditions that we had was every Memorial Day we would get together in this little place in Oklahoma, have a family reunion, decorate graves, and talk about the good times.
Mm.
And so, yeah, I made this. I'm very proud.
So how old were you when you did this? And didn't this
Oh,
end up
this
on
is
display?
actually, huh?
Didn't this end up on display?
Yeah, this ended up in display. I drove all the way down to Oklahoma. I live in Kansas City currently. Drove down to the Capitol building, like capital of Cherokee Nation, which is Tahlequah, to see this. And this happened this year, actually.
Oh, nice.
Very nice.
and and this year they were honoring this group in the nation called the Cherokee Freedmen.
Mm.
The Cherokee Freemen are the former enslaved people that the Cherokee people used to own,
Mm-hmm.
which a lot of people don't know.
Right, right.
Yeah, that did happen. We were just talking about that before the show. There are a whole lot of people that got involved in the whole slavery business. So we have some parts of our history where the indigenous people helped the enslaved Africans to escape to freedom
As
and
to
intermingled.
Mexicans.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
yes, and so there's that cohesion and intermarriage. So a lot of people in their ancestry, they have that. And then we have some of the indigenous people that bought and sold enslaved Africans, and they prospered from that, just as others who prospered from free labor. And there's that history. So, one of the challenges that we have is to tell what happened without being angry about it. And then just having, I think, uh, young people have the discussion about the ethics of the decisions you make and how to treat people. And one of the things, we'll be talking about this in a future show, but we're launching a class called Parenting with Peace, where a lot of it is how to help children develop an ethical way of looking at life. So as they assess right and wrong and look at history, even with what they learn in school, they can see, okay, this was a good thing these people did. Oh, this wasn't right what these people did. And everybody did some wrong to people. So
Mm-hmm.
Everybody did some wrong. Everybody, there are no all good and all bad people. There were people who were enslavers. There were people who were abolitionists. There were people from all different ethnicities. as we well know, that there were Africans that were involved in the slave trade because that was the way
Mhm.
they prospered, after their wars,
Right.
So we have to, and the thing is that with this country, we tend to want to uh, uh, um, wash over our
You
things.
can say whitewash.
In Germany, they talked about the Holocaust. So
Mhm.
that they know what happened.
Right.
In South Africa, they did a truth and
Yeah.
reconciliation.
And we need to do
So,
that here.
so that's one of the things that we have really come to grips with, is that um, we need to be willing to tell the truth, even though it's painful.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
it's
because
really important that our own people are willing to come forth with that. I know that the American Indian Center in Chicago, which was established in 1953, they do more than just show a lot of old artifacts. They will have regular programs where they will talk about a lot of the things in the past. They have a museum, they have an art center, they have an entertainment group. This has been going on. It's on the north side on Ainsley Avenue. We interacted with them a lot when we would help out homeless Indigenous people and send them there to be reacclimated into urban society. And we learned so much. I remember being a part, well, not really being a part, but actually being there for an actual Congress that they had, where they had a panel of Indigenous, particularly the Powhatan tribe, where they talked about the Disney representation with the Pocahontas movie, how untruthful the entire portrayal was. And
It
also,
was
they
12.
showed live pictures of how Powhatan women looked. They did not look like the Barbie doll image that was shown in the cartoon. So there was much discussion about dealing with reality, telling the truth, telling it honestly, and being able to impart that to our European based neighbors, in addition to teaching our own Native people.
yeah. Well, I look at a lot of the movies, and that's another thing. How do we deal with the propaganda that's in a lot of the movies that have been popular, like the Pocahontas? I mean, how old was that kid when I took her there? Like 6 or 7. I mean,
Yeah.
we love that movie. We all loved it. Oh, this
And
wonderful.
one Halloween, Lorelai had a Pocahontas costume. But Cheyenne,
Which,
I would like to know your thoughts on that image.
yes,
Oh,
and that whole Halloween thing too.
yeah, Pocahontas, it was crazy when I finally found out the true story. I was in high school. She was a little child. She was a
She was
literal
12.
child.
Yes.
And she died young due to
She did.
disease. And
Yeah.
her whole story was just tragic.
Oh, wow.
Like it
And in
it really
fact,
just had me sick reading what happened to her. And then they glamorized her whole story in Disney, made her look like a grown woman. It's
Oh.
just all distasteful. One of the ways that you can counteract the propaganda is to listen to indigenous voices, to listen to the tribes that are directly effective, right?
Mm.
And listen to their stories.
Wow.
Because if you don't, you're just going to hear propaganda all around you.
Yeah. I
And
think
are we aware that they are still, because she was kidnapped. She was kidnapped and taken to England, and they're still trying to get her remains back here in her native land to
wow.
this day.
Wow.
and that's just sickening.
I did
It is
not know
sickening.
that. So
It-
so the whole Pocahontas thing was a lie. I mean, her
Mhm.
falling in love and all this business, and
She did not marry the man that she married in the movie either. That was another thing. That person was a friend.
Well,
Well, it's all about,
12.
cartoons and all that kind of thing. But Cheyenne, I would like to know, do you have any kind of places where you live for Indigenous education, like museums or something like that, or a National Indian Center like they have in Chicago, which was the first in the country, by the way?
Oh yes, we have a Indian Center. It's called the Kansas City Indian Center. I believe it's in Kansas City, Missouri, right? And then we also have a university called Haskell University that was made for Indian folks, right? First, it was, I believe, was a missionary school,
Oh
which is
no.
very, very
Yes.
problematic. But over the years, they worked to make it better and to make
Hmm.
it owned by,
Right.
Well, that's good. And I think probably every city now is establishing some kind of museum or
oh,
some kind of
oh,
historic landmark. But one of the things that concerns me, there are a lot of like sports teams and things like that, and they have names which some of the indigenous people have said is offensive, and yet people are resistant to change it because like, oh, it's tradition. So what do people tend to think about that? Something like Redskins or whatever. It's people say
Well,
that.
they're no longer Redskins.
Yeah,
They finally bowed to that because
yeah.
they kept saying tradition, which is like what, 80 years. Okay, but indigenous people have been here like way before y'all were, so their tradition still outranks yours. We still have Braves and
We don't
all
have
these
Braves
different.
anymore at Bradley, where I went. They changed the
Yeah.
Bradley Braves to I forgot the name of the thing. He's a gargoyle in a it's a guy in a he's not even a good gargoyle. Really, I wrote an
With some
article
glitter.
about it. It's like a
Well,
doughboy. It's like the Pillsbury doughboy with a horn on his head. I don't
well,
even
yeah, but you
A
know what?
Viking or something.
That
Or,
community is going to be fine with that. The gargoyle community is
yeah,
not going to be
we
fine with
hope
that.
they won't be protesting.
But
like
we
hearing
also
from
but
Demona.
well, the thing is that we have used a people as costumes. uh Halloween, don't
Mhm.
go as an Indian for Halloween if you are not indigenous. These are you know
Oh, it
it,
is so
it
distasteful to
it
see
is like
that.
being in blackface.
Yeah, it's
It's
exactly
like
like being in
blackface.
blackface. Because, talking about the mascots thing, we have the Kansas City Chiefs here. And
Yeah.
so
Still.
you have some of the people who would dress up, paint their face red, and wear
Mm.
it's called the war bonnet, but it's the feathers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
They would wear that, and it's just so, and they would do the little chop.
Oh
And
yeah, the tomahawk
oh
chop,
my
all that. They did that in down there in Atlanta during the baseball too.
Yeah,
And
and I
people
think
talked
they're
about
trying.
that.
They might have, I believe, from what I heard, stopped them from doing the chop and painting their face red. And I
See,
remember seeing that once in real life. I was like,
No, they didn't.
yeah, I was just
well,
absolutely
for
just
me,
shocked.
I think that insensitivity needs to be addressed because when these groups of people go back and forth about we don't want to change the name, it's always been like this, it's been cool. Why don't you get with the indigenous people of the community and let them speak on it? If you want to have a Native American dance in between quarters or halftime at your game, get a real person from that if they want to represent. You have thousands of Native Americans that live all over this country. Instead of avoiding it and bowing to pressure because you are a chicken and don't want to talk to the people about what would be right, how to deal with it, people are going to, your own people are going to have to rise up and address these things because the
Mm.
ones who have done wrong, they're so intimidated or fear filled with guilt that they shy away
Guilt.
from true confrontation. It doesn't have to be a horrible conflict. You just need to be willing to deal with what is right and make things right.
Well, we got to take a break, but I want to take a look at that. I mean, Is there any tasteful way to portray that based on what happened?
I'm gonna
Let's
say
talk
no.
about that and what you know. Is there a way
Yes,
to
if it's a
honor
real
those
Native American.
traditions without it seeming like you're trivializing the
fun.
war aspect of it? But we'll be right back after this quick break. So we want you all to stick and stay. And if you're watching us on Facebook Live or YouTube, feel free to write in your comments. We'll share them with our viewing audience. We'll be right back. So stay with us. The Female Solution Global Radio TV Show invites you to an invigorating conversation with our team of hosts Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. Central Time. Start your week with Monday Morning Mindfulness with Zelda Speaks. Tuesdays, Self-Cell Care with Jody Susan. Wednesdays, Repairing Broken Families with Naima Latif and co-host Kareem Hamid. Thursdays, Soulful Solutions with Dr. Debbie Green. And Fridays, Health and Wellbeing with Beata. Saturdays, tune in 12 noon to 2 p.m. Central Time. First Saturday, Success Strategies with Jana. Second Saturday, Wendy Williams Esquire on relationships. Third Saturday, Move Around with Deborah. And fourth Saturday, Wisdom with Mama D. Join us Sundays, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Central Time for Soul Purpose Healing with Beata. Call in and comment 515-605-9325. Press 1 to speak to the host and be a part of the solution. And we are back. And we are talking about Indigenous Peoples Day. Should it replace Columbus Day as the official celebration of the beginning of this nation? And how do we deal with the brutality of it? How do we deal with the painful stories? And is there a way to honor the traditions of Native people, the dances? I've been to like the powwows and things like that, celebrations of the culture, and I've been to different people events. Is there a way to honor that during a sporting event, or is that not appropriate? What do you think about that?
Okay, if you wanted to name a team, the Blackies, and have someone come out in blackface
and tap dance.
No, not tap. Well, because tap dancing, actually, that or any other kind of minstrel show, but actually tap dancing is the one original art form from America. One of the few.
Okay.
Tap
So would that be offensive?
Just letting you know, as a tap dancer, just letting you know that tap and jazz are originally from
American culture.
American culture. But say you want to do that, and then some people said, well, that's offensive. And they said, yeah, but we're honoring you. Now, how would you feel? And people, well, that's what we're doing. We are doing that. And then we're saying, oh, but you know what? We're honoring your culture. All y'all people aren't honoring anything. You are using religious symbols. If you are Catholic and you were at, a Catholic university, and they had people come out in the Pope Mobile and do all the crosses and stuff and throw out communion wafers, and they said, oh, but we're honoring our tradition, wouldn't those Catholics be offended? We are not thinking like normal human beings. We are dehumanizing our indigenous brothers and sisters because we have decided that we can other them, so that we're not saying, you know what, this is a tradition. These are their religious ceremonies. They have their own culture, and there are many nations, many indigenous nations, and they're just putting them all in together and then saying, oh, well, we're honoring you and we're letting our kids dress up. And yes, Sarah did dress up as Pocahontas when she was a little girl. Would she do that now? Absolutely not. When you know better, you do better.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could go as Trump and wear a mask.
And paint your hair orange. Yeah, so
I could go as Pennywise too, another clown.
No name calling. But what about the little things like the ooh? I mean, where does that stuff come
I
from?
feel like there's no good way of quote unquote honoring because there's no honor in this type of
Right,
stuff.
right. It's
Mhm.
And it's
mockery.
just making a mockery and putting
Mockery.
one, like they're putting all the Native American cultures into one
Mhm.
and making it a monolith where there's so many different varieties, so
Yes.
many cultures, so
Many
many
different
groups,
nations. Yes.
and they're just making a mockery of it because they wouldn't want that done to their people.
Mm-mm.
Right.
They
Right.
wouldn't want any of that happening. Oh, we're going to make you a mascot. Does that make you feel better for everything that happened to you all?
No.
You know, and it's interesting. Every time somebody would say something when I worked at the Globe, one of my colleagues would say, "Okay, fine, then let's get rid of the Fighting Irish of Notre Dame." Hey,
Yeah.
I'm good with that.
The
But you know
Irish
what?
are good,
But
yeah.
you
The
know what?
Irish might like that. I have not heard any Irish people saying,
That's
"I don't like
and
y'all
I only
using
know of
us as
one,
a
and that's
thing."
the only one who would say that. And you know, as you know, and the thing is that that came from them. If somebody said, you know, if there was an Irish group or an Irish person says that is offensive to me, okay, I'm good with that too.
Yeah.
But you know, but the thing is that what they will do when it is a Native American or an indigenous person, I'm not sure which is the best term,
Tribe.
but
You can use
they will
all.
go to one who says, "Oh, I don't care about that," and they'll
Mhm.
say, "See, you know, it's like
So
you
one
know
person
you're
can't
pulling up, you
change,
know,
can't
Kanye
decide.
or Candace Owens or Diamond and Silk or one of those people say, see, they said that we're doing okay, so you know that's fine. Well, you know what? Other people are offended. And if someone is offended, just listen to them.
Right.
It's not going to hurt you to change your name to something else. Lions and tigers and bears. Oh
Oh
my.
my.
None of them have a lobby that we worry about or that is going to be mocking them. And because if you're talking about ferocity, but you know, you're talking about you're othering people and you're making it as if they are like animals instead of
Mm.
like people.
Yeah.
Now,
Oh,
speaking of animals, and when we have a Facebook user that says interesting perspectives. Now, you know, people like to name heroes in battles and war and everything, and usually the winner will frame the story. My perspective is that all war is bad. You know, whenever there was a fighting, there was no winner, just people got killed. We should not glorify that to our children. We should not make people who went into battle heroes. But I know as far as, you know, when African Americans want to talk about people that did things, they talk about the Buffalo Soldiers that actually made war against the indigenous people and we're victorious. We're very fierce, and we're named Buffalo Soldiers because of the, you know, the hair, like woolly like buffalo, and we're really tough and everything. So I've seen where during, you know, Black History Month celebrations, they talk about that, but that also, just like the indigenous people who held slaves, this was not the best part of our relationship. How do we address that? What are your thoughts on that, Cheyenne? Is that something that needs to be mended? How do we address it? Because you can't, on the one hand, say these things, but then not admit you don't, you know, you're
Mhm.
so.
also
Well, I can speak
part
from
of
my own perspective, right? Back in the 1970s, right? They kicked out a lot of the black Cherokees
it.
out of the tribe.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're trying and the black Cherokees had to go through a lawsuit.
Mm.
We call ourselves the Cherokee Freemen. We went through lawsuit and won because that was illegal. Someone kicked us out because I think I heard they didn't want to lose an election, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh.
So they disenrolled everyone.
Mm.
And so now they're making amends and saying, wow, that was so messed up. We're sorry. They're telling our history and sharing it to multiple all across the world about what happened, right? They had a whole museum in a day just dedicated to talking about our history and what happened. And I think that's one of the beautiful ways that we as a whole we're making amends.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Right.
Mm. I think
And
that's really what has to happen I think we need to make amends in America. I think there needs to be like a truth and reconciliation council.
there needs to be conversations.
Put your stuff out there. Okay, we did this to y'all. Yeah, we did this to y'all, and we're sorry. And let's not do it again. I mean, I think if we did that, then I think we wouldn't have to be afraid to teach the history, just like you say, the way they do in Germany about the Holocaust. Yeah, tell what happened. Yeah, it was ugly. Okay, we did this. We won't do it again.
And there were a lot of people who stood by and silently and watched it happen.
Yeah.
And we have to understand that. I want to mention on something because my Senator Warren, there was this big controversy about she had said something about, being part Native American. And people really blasted her. And then when she went and got DNA tested, it's like 0.1% or something, about the same as ours is. But you know what? I never blamed her for that because we also were told those same stories. And those were the stories she was told in her family. And it's not until we now do DNA that we can find out. I think in ours it's like 1% or less, or maybe even less than 1%. But we were told those same stories. Oh, yes, we have a Cherokee great grandmother. This is why,
it's not enough to get any benefits. So,
I could speak on this personally.
Yes.
So with the DNA testing, right, we are able to find out who your relatives are. Mm-hmm. But one of the things with Cherokee Nation is not based on blood quantum per se. It's based on blood quantum is like how much blood you have.
Right,
how much
what
blood
percentage,
Yeah. It's not based on that. It's based on lineage and seeing if your ancestors register. And if they were living in the land, or even if they were living out, they were forced to register. And I believe they arrested some people for not registering because they didn't want to give up the nation and the land, because that's when they broke up everything.
Mm-hmm.
And they were forced to assimilate.
Yes.
And one of the most common myths of like all types of people in America is that their grandparents or great-great-grandparents grandmother was a Cherokee. She's a Cherokee princess.
Always.
And first of all, there's no Cherokee princess in the tribes. Two, I can speak on the African American community per se. That came up because people who had the high cheekbones, who were light-skinned with long hair, they didn't want to admit that they were like the child of the slave owner.
Oh, so it was more fashionable to be Native American.
Yeah, because
to be white.
Yeah, to be part white and to be the slave owner's child, they looked down on you, right? Or they didn't want to just be associated with that constant reminder. That's my father. That's my grandfather. Slavery, right? His blood's running from me. You can't change that. So people would tell their children so they wouldn't be ashamed. Hey, you are Cherokee. You are this. You are that. You're Blackfoot. And it's really interesting to see this all play out, because even though I am a citizen, right? I had those same rumors in my family on the other side. And when I did my genealogy, and I found out that I had a lot of white cousins over there.
Yeah, we
do too.
Yeah, it was crazy.
I was like, folks who apparently were passing, because all of a sudden they're starting to show up in our lineage, like fourth cousins and stuff. I said, where are these white people coming from?
Yeah, it's crazy, because then you have the people who passed as white as well, and it's a whole mess. Oh, I also do genealogy and have a genealogy business.
Oh, that's interesting.
Called Connected Trees.
Wow.
And so I go through this a lot.
Wow. So in your genealogy business, have you found authentically that there are a lot of African Americans who do in fact have a sizable percentage of Native American ancestry, or does it tend to be more, white ancestry, which is what we found in our DNA tracing?
It honestly depends on where your family's from, right? From people who were living in Oklahoma, sometimes you just find that it's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. But if you're in like
Georgia or somewhere,
Mississippi, Florida, you don't see that. And also you don't see it in like North Carolina, South Carolina. There's also really interesting is that there's subgroups in African American culture, like the Gula Geechee.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a point where, because after so many generations, everybody's a little bit of everybody. At some
Yeah,
point, it
basically.
shouldn't even matter, like, because if you have different kinds of features and maybe different combinations, people look at you and say, "Well, what are you?" You know, and at some point, it's like, why does it matter?
Yeah. It's not none of your business.
Yeah. Are you going to treat me
Well, there's
differently
that.
from something else? You know, but now,
Sometimes you feel like people ask that because they're trying to type you some way or try
yeah,
to figure out, do you need to know what I am so that you can treat me differently, better or worse or other, why is that important?
yeah,
Uh, but about the thing about Georgia, my friend Lisa, who is with the Muskogee Creek tribe. And she currently is, well, she was originally from Oklahoma, but she told me that her people were actually forced out of Georgia by the government. They were told, "Oh, you're savage," and so you have a lot of government interference that moved whole tribes of people, broke up families over the country over time for some reason or other that was related to government
Mm-hmm.
Well,
interference.
yeah, of course, we all know that. And you know what? What's fun? Of course, we know about the Trail of Tears.
Mm-hmm.
But
yes,
the thing is that we read about it when we were little kids. We didn't even know that that was what it was. But
That's
think
true.
about the Laurel Ingalls Wilder books when she
Yes.
talked about them
mm,
moving these all the Indians off of the
families,
land
yes,
because the settlers were coming in. So we learned about this, but we learned about it from the perspective of a
of white
child
people,
and
Yeah.
didn't get the brutality
right?
of people being moved off of the land that they had been on for centuries because white people came in and wanted that land.
Yeah, there was a
Exactly.
lot of forced movement throughout, and they all put them in certain little areas and
Hmm.
reservations. Where the
Hmm.
reservations nowadays, some of them don't even have clean water. The
Right.
fruit's expensive. The food's totally expensive. It's it's just bad, and they forced them there, right? When they could still be living on the original land where they know where they're at, where they've been for millenniums. And it's just sad. And
Now, is there a way, I mean, there's a lot of land still across the country and even in urban areas that's just not really used for anything like food growing, which it could be. It's just wasteland. Is there any way to repair what was done by granting people land somewhere where they used to own land, where the land is it's fit to grow food? And I know, hunting is not really a way of life anymore, but you can still farm. Or is everything just too urbanized, and are is it have too many generations passed to be able to repair the damage,
I
or is
feel
everything repairable? I mean, if you just
what's
decide to.
interesting with that is that I believe there should be some land given back. Okay, land back,
Reparations for a lot of folks.
even for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yes. And what's crazy is that how it's going to work is that some of these people have been removed for generations.
Yeah,
My family walked the Trail of Tears in the 1830s. All I know is where we ended up, Oklahoma. I'm not
Mhm.
sure what's going out in like where it was originally like over there, the original land was
Mhm.
like. I wouldn't be able to adapt to that. And I wouldn't be comfortable of them forcing people back to their own land either. Like
yeah.
giving them that free land.
Now you're
Like you
uprooting
can get that
again.
free land over here, but why? I'm living here now after you
Hmm.
forced us here.
And of course, you know what happened at the Osage, when they found out they moved these people to where they thought they couldn't farm or anything. And then when they found oil on the land and
Yeah,
that tribe became very rich, then suddenly a lot of them suddenly started dying. They were murdered because and they
Yes.
made laws to make sure that they had to have white conservators to make
Hmm.
sure that they couldn't take their money. So there's always somebody's hand in your pocket. You
Yeah.
Yeah,
know.
and it's so crazy because I don't live, my family doesn't live too far from the Osage Nation, and a lot of people all across Oklahoma went missing. They all, like, as
Oh
soon as the
yes,
land
they did.
got found
Wow.
oil, they just went missing,
Yep.
and
Scary.
it's crazy. And now I think now they're doing a movie about the Osage Nation called
Yeah.
the
That's
Flat.
from the book Killers of the Flower Moon.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
that's
That's
Mm.
it.
the
yeah.
book. That's on my list. That's one of my listed
Wow.
books that I give my students to as
To
one of their
read.
choices. It's a
Yeah.
It's
fabulous
the
book.
beginning chapters are already so chilling. You're like, whoa.
So Cheryl, in your class where a lot of students are, learning about um, the various cultures and things that they didn't know about, do you find that a lot of information about indigenous people is extremely distorted or missing or influenced by Hollywood? What do
Not
you
so
see?
much influenced by Hollywood, but they all, when I asked them, a couple of weeks ago, 'cause we talked about indigenous people, and I said, how many people here learned that Christopher Columbus discovered America? And just about every hand went up. One that didn't was one of my students she's Afro Latina, and she grew up in Colombia. And she said she came over here in middle school, and of course she knew what happened with Columbus. And she said she was arguing with her teacher when she was in school because she said that's not what happened. So yes, 40
Interesting.
some years, 40, 50 years after we've gotten out of grade school, and obviously Cheyenne can attest to that, they're still teaching the same lie, even though Google will tell you something totally different. Google is your friend, people. Google is your friend. Go
Well,
and Google
kudos to that
Christopher Columbus.
student who spoke up as a child to a teacher to
Yes.
confront
Oh yeah,
untruth.
all of my students are amazing. But the thing is that they're brilliant in that they take the information and they soak it in and they say, "Oh, well, this is really awful. I thought I had a good education, and now I'm hearing that all I was told was lies."
Mm,
You know what's really crazy though is that in America we're taught about Christopher Columbus a lot, but
yeah.
in
Mhm.
other countries they're not at all. It's like he
Mm.
didn't discover America.
So they know better.
Yeah, they
So
know
They
better.
know
we got
better,
the
and
problem.
he was really a bad actor. They
Yeah.
don't even know where he's buried now because they just kept having to dig him up and move him all over the place because
He,
nobody wanted him.
and I from what I can what when I got older and remember reading about him, he was considered a horrible person and during his time that he was alive.
Yes,
Like
Ooh.
yes,
if he was considered bad back then, he must
You only
be
get to be a
worse.
hero.
No, there's
yes,
no way he should be a hero. He's a disgusting man.
yes, yes.
Mm.
Well, let me ask you a bit of a controversial question. In Chicago, in Little Italy, there was a big fight when they removed the Christopher Columbus statue.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? Should they have just let it stay there in Little Italy with the Italians, their little thing, or was that a was that a good way to make a wake up call?
Mm.
Hmm.
Anybody?
Well,
I'll take that.
I guess some people
Mhm.
say, okay, leave the statue there so we can talk about what happened. But then a statue implies honor because you don't have any statues of like Hitler anywhere, right?
That's
Because
exactly right. That's what I was going to say. They beheaded the Christopher Columbus statue in the North End. So, and people were upset about it, but you know what? So he beheaded folks himself. So,
mm,
whatever, sauce for the goose, sauce for the gander. But also, like you said, that was the whole thing with the Confederate statues and other things like that,
mm,
is that we over here try to pretend like we're honoring people, but really a lot of these statues are also intimidation. Now a lot of people grew up and they didn't know the history of Christopher Columbus. Now that you know better, you do better. Yes, you need to get rid of it because over in Germany they don't have statues of their history of Hitler. In
right.
Italy you don't see, not yet anyway, Mussolini. We're the only ones who
Yeah.
want to honor our villains. We honor our villains.
Well, I will tell
Mhm.
you what they do in China. their bad history, when it is like the anniversary of bad stuff that happened in their country, they don't talk about it. They don't acknowledge it. They shut down the phone system. They shut down the internet for 2 weeks, depending on what the thing is. Like that whole thing with the protesters and the tanks that happened in Tiananmen
Tiananmen
Square.
Square. But they don't teach it because they're communists and they don't teach it at
That's
all.
exactly
So you
right.
have a generation that's growing up that didn't even know that it ever happened.
That
And
is
that's not
true.
what we're saying. We're saying you teach it, but you teach the truth. You don't honor villains and then pretend like it's our heritage. And a
Yeah.
lot of Italians will say the same thing.
Wow. I guess that's the thing, you know, when somebody's been made a hero and then it's discovered that they were, or let's say, a zero.
Hey, we ain't watching Bill Cosby anymore, are we?
Well, I still like the show, but you know,
Well, you can still get the DVD
character,
at
that's not the
Walmart.
person, you know. That's another whole show in itself.
Oh yeah.
But well, we do have to go. And I do think it's important that we teach what happened and teach what people did, and admit that everybody comes from somebody who did something. So really, everybody's responsible for the state of affairs that we're in right now. I know in South Korea, they have the war memorial, and they got all these centuries of atrocities and memorials of the weapons and all that stuff. But the whole purpose of that museum is to say, let this never happen again. So
yes, exactly.
Let's do that.
We in our country need to talk about our original sin, which is the genocide of the Native Americans through disease and everything else. And that's one of the main things that made America what it is nowadays.
We gotta say it.
And it's just crazy because we don't learn about it in school. They're trying to get rid of certain people's histories in school with the critical race theory thing by saying it, oh no, our children can't handle that. Kids can handle more than what we expect them to.
Yes, they can. And you know what? And they can learn empathy that way.
That's what we need to teach. We need to teach empathy. And I think that is what will change the future. If we tell them what happened from the standpoint of this is a bad thing that people did to each other, we're never going to do this again.
Yes, but you have to know that you did it the first time.
I have to admit you did it. That's the way you teach ethics. Well, thanks so much, Cheyenne. We appreciate you enlightening us today. And we want you all to leave your comments on our YouTube channel or our Facebook page, 3 Black Moms. And
can we ask how can we ask how we can get Cheyenne's genealogy business?
Yes, tell us about then we got a Facebook user said that just imagine where he was programmed and that with that behavior and participation is being acceptable. Bill Cosby, yeah, that's another whole thing, being programmed to think that what was done was okay. That's part of our
so I am on Facebook and I have a website called connectedtrees.com.
Connectedtrees.com.
Yes.
It's called connectedtrees.com.
Yes. And that's my website. I do all sorts of genealogy. I can find whole lineages.
All right, so let's see now. Is this spelled correctly? Connectedtrees.com?
Yes, that's it.
All right. Great. So find out who you are. Go to connectedtrees.com and talk to Cheyenne.
And then we won't be so ugly to each other.
That's right. We'll find out we all related. Right. Well, we've got to go. Thank you so much. Until next time. And we look forward to you joining us again, 5 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Eastern. Till next Sunday, I'm Naima.
I'm Cheryl.
I'm Barbara. Thank you, Cheyenne, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. We are 3 Black moms.
And 1 Black daughter.
Yes.
Who is Indigenous. We'll see you next time.
Barbara.
I'm Cheryl.
And I'm Naima. We're 3 Black moms.